Morning. So today I want to start with a verse from our Yable Moon chant that we did earlier this morning. It goes like this. Chishin Huemyong E Teji Moon Su Saribosal Ding Boyan Bosal Devi Guan Seum Bosal Dewan Bonjan Jijang Bosal Mahasal. Does anyone know the meaning of that particular verse? Clergy doesn't count. Yeah, very good. Homage to the Bodhisattvas, exactly right. The four great Bodhisattvas of Mahayana Buddhism. In English, that verse translates to, we pay homage to Manjushri, the Bodhisattva of great wisdom, Samantabhadra, the Bodhisattva of great action, the greatly compassionate Avalokiteshvara Bodhisattva, and the Lord of many vows, Ksitigarbha Bodhisattva. So that's what that verse in our morning chanting, that's what that means, and who we're paying homage to in that particular verse. So if you haven't heard of this term bodhisattva before, what is a bodhisattva? Well, bodhisattvas are beings who are dedicated to this idea of universal awakening or enlightenment, and they carry out the work of the Buddhas. And importantly, the bodhisattva vows not to personally settle into salvation or their final Buddhahood or nirvana until they assist all beings through space and time to realize this experience. So this bodhisattva ideal is this heroic ideal of the Mahayana, or the great vehicle. And that's part of what our Korean Sun Zen tradition is, in this Mahayana umbrella that follows the bodhisattva path. And for me, out of the whole kind of Buddhist pantheon of all the myths and legends and symbolism and art, I really love the idea of the bodhisattva, seeing them represented, the characteristics and qualities and virtues that they embody and manifest, and can kind of serve as guides. And that's for me how they function as figures, as psychological and a spiritual model, or archetypes that Jung talked about, also components of our psyche and catalysts to help our self-understanding. So this morning I want to introduce us to the four great bodhisattvas. There's many more than four, but in East Asian Buddhism in particular, we really highlight and focus on four major bodhisattvas to understand a little bit more about them, about their qualities, their symbolism, and kind of for ourselves, how we might be able to embody and manifest some of their virtues in our own lives. So if you're really interested in the bodhisattvas, I pulled a lot of what I'm sharing with you out of this book called Faces of Compassion, the classic bodhisattva archetypes in their modern expression by Taigen Dan Layton. He practices in the Japanese Zen tradition, but a lot of what he shares is applicable to all kind of different practices. So I have some visual aids to help us, and they're right behind you, Bubsong. If maybe you can help me out, just grab that first one there. If you can hold that up, you can be like kind of like Vanna White, you know. You don't have to hold that. You can. So this first bodhisattva, you can see this is Manjushri, the bodhisattva of wisdom. Um, and really, his role and what he does is penetrates and expounds this idea of fundamental emptiness or the true nature of all things. You can see in the left image, he often rides on a lion and wields a sword. In this case, this one, he does have the sword. You can kind of see it there. Yeah, this flaming sword that's used to cut through delusion and ignorance. In many Zen meditation halls, there's a statue of Manjushri sitting in the center of the meditation practice space to help encourage deep introspection and awakening. Sometimes he's often depicted as a young prince, like the right image you see there. And other times he's manifested as a beggar. Some scholars have identified Manjushri as the oldest and most significant bodhisattva in Mahayana literature, and sometimes is considered the chief bodhisattva. He was one of the first to inspire a bodhisattva cult of veneration, which is interesting. The young image of him there reflects this idea of purity and innocence, and also that wisdom is not dependent on experience or age. Um, so that's some of what these images mean. He's the main interlocutor in many sutras, posing questions to the Buddha on behalf of the assembly. If you read some of the Mahayana Prajnaparamita or like the Vimalakirti Sutra, he has a main role in there. And like all four of the bodhisattvas that we'll go through, each of them has their own um, uh, dedicated sacred mountain in China. That all of them serve as kind of a pilgrimage site or pilgrimage circuit. That many of them have hundreds of temples around some of these mountains. And his is Mount Wutai in Shanxi province in northern China. Um, yeah, so a little bit more about some of the symbolism in the photo here. So the left one, you see him sitting on a lion, right? This lion can symbolize a few things. It can symbolize fearless wisdom, and in a lot of the uh, Buddhist scriptures and sutras, talk about the lion's roar, right? This power that the Buddha Dharma has that can disperse ignorance. It can also represent another alternate interpretation of the lion, can represent the use of wisdom to tame the mind, which is compared to riding or subduing a ferocious lion. And the blue color usually indicates kind of transcendic or cosmic power, and is associated with the void and purity in Mahayana iconography. The lotus flower that's prevalent in many of the bodhisattva images symbolizes purity amidst samsara, kind of like our name, muddy water Zen, that the lotus rises out of the muddy water. So you have this something pure coming out of something else, right? On the lotus, there's a book. You can see, yep, that red book on top of the lotus up by his face there represents some of the Mahaprajna Paramita Sutra about wisdom and transcending dualistic thinking. The sword, like I said, represents cutting off delusion and ignorance. And you see he's very ornate, has a lot of jewelry, crown, which was very common to signal a kind of the bodhisattva regalia of like a spiritual royalty. So you see a lot of them are decorated very ornately with lots of jewels and things like that. Um, all right, so that's good for that. Hopefully your arms don't get too tired. We got a few more to go. Yeah, good. Um, so that's a little bit around some of the symbolism and what you see when we look at those depictions of Manjushri. Um, how might that apply or we use it in our own lives? When might we turn to this idea, this archetype for ourselves? So Manjushri, the Bodhisattva of wisdom, we can think of maybe when we're facing some kind of confusion or a moral dilemma or some kind of uncertainty, we can invoke some of the wisdom and power of Manjushri. When we might be overwhelmed by a kind of maybe emotional reactivity would be a good time to do some Manjushri practices. When we're studying, reading, meditation retreats. When we were doing started the Dhammapada study group like a year or two ago, and sometimes in our study groups we start with the Manjushri Gatha, a recitation, and all these bodhisattvas have particular mantras associated with them too. So that's when we might want to think of Manjushri and how can we embody this idea of wisdom. It could be something like asking good questions instead of assuming answers. We could work on cultivating clarity without a kind of suspicion or cruelty or meanness. Letting our insights be precise but gentle. And notice where sometimes our own ego may masquerade as certainty, right? When we get kind of stuck in our own perspectives and opinions and ideas, or when you're tempted to speak out impulsively or defend the ego. So that would be some things we could do. So like I said, there's like each of them have their own mantra. Manjushri's is Om Arapa Sanadi, is this mantra, which means to cut through delusion. And keep a wisdom journal is another practice. And ask yourself, what am I believing that might not be true? You can read part of the Vimalakirti Sutra and its exchange with Vimalakirti, which is also very entertaining. If you haven't explored that book yet or that sutra. And just use meditative pauses throughout the day are another way to kind of invoke and manifest this power of Manjushri. So he's our first bodhisattva. The next one, I got posters for all of them. And also, if you know our Tengwa, our big, beautiful painting behind the altar here, if you come up later, you can see it closer after service, but there's the four bodhisattvas are flanking the right and left side of the Buddha in the painting behind the altar here. So you can see they're arranged there as well. This next one is Samantabhadra, the bodhisattva of great vow and practice. This idea of heroic effort and skillful action. Samantabhadra's name means something like universal virtue or universal worthy, associated with practice and meditation. Manjushri and Samantabhadra typically make up the trinity or the triad when you see like three statues on some other traditional Buddhist altars with Shakyamuni Buddha in the middle, then Samantabhadra and Manjushri on either side. So when you see those in pictures or online of especially Korean Buddhist temples that have like three golden statues, that's usually who it is Shakyamuni in the middle, and then Samantabhadra and Manjushri there. Samantabhadra is one of the main characters, and one of our order's main sutras, the Avatamsaka Sutra, the Flower Ornament Sutra, which is a giant book. It's like 1,500 pages, something like that. And importantly, in that one, Samantabhadra is known for his set of 10 vows, which have implications for his archetype. And the 10 vows are venerating Buddhas, praising Buddhas, making offerings to Buddhas, confessing one's past misdeeds. So often Samantabhadra would be the focus of the bodhisattva. If you are repenting or atoning or apologizing for something you did, you confess to Samantabhadra in some denominations and practices. Rejoicing in the happiness of others, requesting Buddhas to teach, requesting Buddhas not to enter nirvana, studying the Dharma in order to teach it, and transferring one's merits to others, which is common part of liturgy in many Zen traditions of closing the service by that dedication of merit. Samantabhadra I learned some of these things putting these notes together, is omnipresent in all places and all times, even in every single atom. And he's especially hard to encounter explicitly. There's stories and myths of people kind of encountering um, manifestations of Manjushri or Avalokiteshvara. And there's lots of stories in the Zen literature about that. Samantrabhadra is very hard to have encounters with, um, and he often acts hidden in the world. So he emphasizes this kind of idea of hidden practice, which has been a motif in Buddhist history, um, of Zen masters going incognito, like into the marketplace or under a bridge. There's a famous, the 9th century founder of the Soto Zen lineage in China, Dongshan, told his successors to hide your practice, serving secretly as if a fool, like an idiot. This idea of embodying Samantabhadra, and that you're doing good works, but not for you to get the praise or the commendation, that the good deeds are kind of without any kind of idea of ego, right? That can be more effective in helping, right? So anonymously occupying ordinary roles to help inspire others to do likewise, is part of Samantrabhadra's archetype. And the imagery in the left one, you see he's got a animal too, like Manjushri with a lion. Samantrabhadra has a white elephant, and not in this picture, but in many others, with 6 tusks. And when you see the images of Samantabhadra with the elephant with the 6 tusks, those usually symbolize purification of the 6 senses: eye, ear, nose, tongue, body, and mind. Or also the first 6 of the paramitas, the perfections there. The white symbolizes royalty, mental strength, spiritual power. And some believe there's a connection with this being the same elephant that the Buddha's mother, Queen Maya, had in a dream before the Buddha was born. So it also symbolizes his vow to be reborn in the world for the sake of all beings, and this continuity of the Bodhisattva path through the Buddhist conception, through ongoing compassionate action. So really rich and lots of symbolism and things going on when you look at any of these kind of pieces of art or statues or things. Like all the things we have in our temple here, everything is packed with some kind of meaning and reason for exactly the way it looks and appears. Um, okay, so I think we got that one. So when do you turn to Samantabhadra? Maybe when you're struggling to follow through on your intentions, um, feelings of spiritual complacency, when you want to live a more ethically and courageously, you can invoke Samantabhadra. Ways to do that: can begin your day with a vow, make it small but sincere, something you vow to do, dedicating our actions to others, not to boost up ourselves, and aligning our words, deeds, and intentions. You can read and recite the 10 great vows of Samantabhadra, make a vow each day, like that. All right. Next slide. Yeah, it's like manual PowerPoint here. It's great. Siddhi Garba, or often known in our Korean chant, Jijang Bosal. In Japanese, you probably heard the name Jizo before. This is the Bodhisattva of vows to the hell realms, particularly revered in East Asian Buddhism, and one of the only bodhisattvas that's usually depicted as a Buddhist monk. Here you see on the left. His name, Siddhigarbha, means something like earth treasury or earth store or earth womb. And he's known for his vow to take on the responsibility for the instruction of all beings in the 6 worlds between the death of Gautama Buddha, Shakyamuni Buddha, and the rise of Maitreya Buddha, the next Buddha, which is only 567 billion years from now, when Maitreya is gonna manifest according to the scriptures and in our tradition. So Siddhigarbha has vowed that he's not going to achieve Buddhahood until all the hells are emptied. And if you didn't know, Buddhism has more than one hell. We have quite a few hells, hot ones, cold ones, and everything in between. So he's regarded as the bodhisattva of hell beings as well as the guardian, especially in, I know the Japanese tradition in particular, of children, of travelers at certain kind of thresholds, um, also of the stillborn and the aborted. Back when I was in undergrad, I did a whole research paper on Siddhigarbha for one of my classes, about that, which is really interesting. And he's got a good. If you like Siddhigarbha, there's a really great book by J.N. Chosenbays called Jizo Bodhisattva. They can read all about his history and stories there. So some of the symbolism in these photos on the left, something you can see some flames in the background there. This symbolizes those hell realms, right, where he voluntarily enters. The fire evokes his vow to rescue beings from the worst karmic fates. The shaven head monastic robes depicts that he's a fully ordained monk. He usually carries, yep, he's got his staff there, a 6-ring staff, and that's used when he walks. It jingles and jangles and makes a lot of noise to alert spirits and beings in the darkness, also to scare away any little bugs or insects to get out of his way so he doesn't inadvertently hurt any bugs there. The 6 rings also correspond to the 6 realms of rebirth: gods, humans, asuras, animals, hungry ghosts, and hell beings. In his other hand, he has this kind of jeweled, it's called a Sintamani, a wish fulfilling jewel, or like a little globe jewel. And that represents spiritual and material aid. It illuminates the darkness of ignorance and fear. And he is also standing on a lotus, like many of the bodhisattvas do, which also indicate pure motivation and untainted action. The right side, the statue looks a little bit differently, and something kind of unique to the Korean statuary of Siddhigarbha is usually his green head, which kind of represents the shaved monk's head, that he doesn't have the same kind of crown and jewels like the other bodhisattvas do. So that's kind of unique for Siddhigarbha or Jijang Bosal. So when might we want to turn to Jijang Bosal? We might be facing any kind of despair or hopelessness or long darkness after somebody has died, or when we might fear death ourselves, when we might be called to support somebody in grief or trauma or crisis, and sometimes when the world may just feel kind of too broken and wondering if what we do still matters. Siddhigarbha is this icon and this symbol of kind of perseverance and effort and non-abandonment, right? So ways we can embody that: stay with suffering without the need to try to escape it or fix it. Make offerings to the unremembered and the unseen and the unknown. Walk willingly into difficult places, outer and inner, with a steady heart. Siddhigarbha vows to help all beings in all levels of hell. So you can emulate that by accompanying people in some of their darkest times: grief, depression, addiction, despair, whatever it may be, like that. And I like one of the quotes that's often attributed and kind of, I don't know if it's direct or paraphrase out of the scriptures, but the vow attributed to Siddhigarbha says, if I do not go into hell, who will? So I really, and I think I maybe said that one time when I started my chaplaincy training like 12 years ago. one of the other chaplains from kind of a fundamental Christian background was, you know, kind of trying to. I was the first Buddhist person I think he ever encountered, and was trying to understand a little bit, but also trying to suss me out. You know, if I was Christian or not. And I told him like, no, I'm Buddhist, and all the things that kind of go along with it. And he says, well, you know, if you don't believe in Jesus, you're going to go to hell. I said, that's okay. There's lots of people down there that need help too. And he didn't quite like that that answer. But I remember that conversation, and I thought of Jijang Bosal there too. Jijang Bosal is one of the few bodhisattvas, especially in Korean Buddhism, that has his own shrine and his own kind of building or temple and worship practices in many Korean Buddhist temple complexes there. So he's got his own little house and building there, and his own also. Kind of monthly day of observation and remembrance as well, as actually all the bodhisattvas do. But I believe Jijang Bosel's day is usually the 14th of the lunar month, where there's more chants and rituals dedicated to commemorate Jijang Bosel. And I spent a lot of time in Japan too, as some of you know. And in Japan, they have you see these little, like, I got my little Jizo little stone statue guy here, but it's very common because he's the protector of children and travelers and kind of spirits and souls, like moving between worlds. In Japan, especially, you'll see a lot of Jizo statues at crossroads and intersections and on the edges of towns and all over. And they're usually adorned with like a little red bib or like a little bonnet hat. And those ones are usually to mark, remembering children that have died in some way. So you'll see a ton of him if you ever go to Japan. And I got this little one that sits on my desk too. Okay, on to our final, saving the most popular one for last. Yeah. This is Avalokiteshvara, the Bodhisattva of Compassion, in Chinese known as Guanyin, in Korean Gwanseum Bosal. We have a couple. So on our altar here over on the left, you see a big, that's more of a Chinese rendition of Avalokiteshvara over there on the side altar. And Yumge, one of our Sangha members here, created and gifted this image over on the other wall there, which is also a representation in a different style of Avalokiteshvara there. So this is the Bodhisattva of Compassion. By far the most popular Bodhisattva in especially in Mahayana and East Asian Buddhism. Avalokiteshvara is considered an emanation of Amitabha Buddha, said to have sprung full blown from Amitabha's head, like this light ray that created Avalokiteshvara. And Avalokiteshvara does the liberative work of Amitabha Buddha, and is associated especially with Pure Land Buddhism. And at the time of death, it's said that Amitabha Buddha and Avalokiteshvara both appear, and Avalokiteshvara helps to kind of escort one to the Pure Land. Interestingly, both Bodhidharma, the founder of Zen in China, and the Dalai Lama are considered incarnations of Avalokiteshvara. If you didn't know that, that's something interesting. Avalokiteshvara's day is the 24th of each lunar month, so actually we just passed it, which was a couple of days ago, because the lunar calendar is a little bit differently. So there are many public ceremonies on those days. And Avalokiteshvara has appeared in more diverse forms and appearances than any other bodhisattva. A total of 33 different manifestations are described, including female manifestations. And Avalokiteshvara particularly took on this female form in China many centuries ago, but often see depicted as both male, female, androgynous, all different presentations there. The second form of Avalokiteshvara is the 11-faced version, and that has an interesting story. A story about the 11-faced Avalokiteshvara describes how so Avalokiteshvara saved all these suffering beings from samsara, and as she was carrying them to the Pure Land, she looked back and saw that samsara was still filled with new beings, and her head split apart in grief. And this happened like 10 times, to where Amitabha provided a new head. So with the aid of Amitabha, Avalokiteshvara in this one depiction has 11 heads, so they can see all planes of existence in all directions to see all suffering beings, which is pretty interesting. I think my favorite one, and we got one more. Yeah. And last image here. This one's my favorite. This one's the thousand hands and eyes Avalokiteshvara, which represents skillful means. Talked a lot about in the Lotus Sutra and the expediency of skillful means. So you see, there's lots of different tools and instruments, from vajras to staffs to lotuses to weapons to all kinds of different things to help to save all beings, right? So this idea that there's all different things, instruments, and means to help there. So that's my favorite one. There's another form called the turning the wish fulfilling gem. Like you remember, Jijang Bosal had that like magic globe or gem to illuminate the hells. Avalokiteshvara has a wish fulfilling gem, and that one, I don't have a picture of that one here, but that one you may have seen, where the Bodhisattva looks more relaxed, like has their leg like propped up with her hand on their knee, kind of like this, resting over the edge. That's the wish fulfilling Guanyin, or Avalokiteshvara. And I'll share one interesting story, because I said there's like 33 different ones. Avalokiteshvara called the wife of Malong. This is one of the, okay, you can put that one. Avalokiteshvara called the wife of Malong, one of the 33, based on the story. So there's a beautiful woman in China, old China, like the year 800. And this beautiful woman was just had all these guys chasing her, wanting to marry her, because she was so beautiful. And she announced she would marry whoever could memorize the Avalokiteshvara chapter of the Lotus Sutra in one night. Right. So 20 guys showed back up, all memorized the chapter, a pretty good length chapter in the Lotus Sutra. Right. Then she said, "All right, now you have to memorize the Diamond Sutra overnight." All right. After that round, 10 guys came back. Then she said, "All right, I'll marry the one who memorized the entire Lotus Sutra within 3 days." And then only one guy came back, his name Malong. He succeeded. He memorized everything. And just as they were about to get married, the young woman collapsed and died. Shortly after the funeral, an old priest appeared, opened up the grave, revealing only golden bones. And then after explaining that she had been a manifestation of Avalokiteshvara, that monk also vanished. So I think that's a really interesting story of one of the manifestations. So some take-home points for Avalokiteshvara. Listen before you act. Ask yourself, can I truly hear this person's pain? Tonglen, or metta practice of taking in other suffering and exchanging that for compassion and love, or loving kindness practice. is particularly associated with Avalokiteshvara there. And I like these bodhisattvas so much. I think some of you know I have tattoos of two of them. I can show you after the service. On my right arm, I have Manjushri, and actually inspired by the picture in our first poster. And my left arm is Avalokiteshvara, which holds a willow branch in one hand, which is used to sprinkle water of compassion and healing, and a water vase, which soothes the torments of hell, anger, and greed. So I can show you those if you want to see those afterwards. All right, so that's our four major bodhisattvas there. So you know a little bit more about the major four bodhisattvas and some ways you can call on them and use them in your own practice. So I want to end, well, a few questions, some closing kind of thoughts of maybe something you might want to do is going forward, maybe this week, choose one bodhisattva you like to walk with this week, to emulate in thought, word, and action. You can reflect, did I act from compassion, wisdom, effort, or resolve today? Remember, Avalokiteshvara shows us how to listen. Manjushri shows us how to see clearly. Siddhi Garbha shows us how to stay. And Samantabhadra shows us how to move. So in closing, I want to share this last part here from the Chunsu Gyung, the Thousand Hands and Eyes Sutra, which again, no surprise, Avalokiteshvara is the main character here. So this is from the sutra and the Dharani that's chanted daily in Korea. I request Avalokiteshvara Bodhisattva, who saves this world with its 1,000 eyes and hands, to grant its all-embracing, perfect, and compassionate Dharani. I bow before Avalokiteshvara Bodhisattva, who possesses mighty strength and graceful appearance, who uses every one of its 1,000 arms to protect this world, and whose 1,000 eyes' brightness look over every part of the world. Avalokiteshvara, unimpeachable speech, teaches secret meanings. It unceasingly shows us the empty, compassionate mind. Avalokiteshvara fulfills our wishes fast and completely wipes out all bad karma. While in heaven, the dragon and the holy beings protect us with compassion, Samyuk Sambodhi will be attained. The newly attained body will be the bright flag. The newly attained mind will be the wonder. With new body and mind, we will get rid of all worldly dust and cross the sea of suffering to attain the expediency which will lead us to the gate of the Bodhi. I faithfully depend on Kwan Seum Bosal to guide me, to attain all true dharmas as soon as possible, to attain the eye of wisdom quickly, to save this world as soon as possible, to promptly attain the expediency, aboard the ship of wisdom, across the sea of suffering as soon as possible, to attain the path of precepts as soon as possible, to reach nirvana promptly, to reach the house of emptiness promptly, become a Buddha as soon as possible.